Hello, everybody. Let me go ahead and stop sharing my sound. Welcome to our June meeting. I can't believe it's June already. Our June NADP monthly member meeting. We already assumed that it was going to be a smaller meeting since so many people are away on vacation, which I wish I was. And I am here in Miami, but I can't complain because I am in a vacation town. I live in a vacation city, so I can't complain. But for those of you that are our members, thank you for coming. We have an unbelievable presentation today. And the good news is that we record our meetings every month, of course, and you should know this because as a member benefit, you can access all of our monthly meetings. And they really are not because I'm president of the NADP and not because we're so passionate about educating divorce professionals, but really honestly, our presentations are amazing every month. The topics have really been very cutting edge and very important in what's trending and what's right now going on in the divorce space. So it's really important that if you have missed a meeting, go on in your own free time, watch the recordings from the previous ones. You'll gain a lot of knowledge, regardless of what profession you're in. And on that note, I didn't even introduce myself. For those of you that I see some new faces here, I am Liz Becker, president and founder of the NADP. I'm also the senior trainer of the Certified Divorce Specialist program. And I do see some of our CDS graduates and designees here on the call. So good to see you all. And what we're going to do is what we do every month for those of you that are either guests or this is your first time. We're going to just go over some housekeeping items, which is pretty much first and foremost, please in your name, change your name to make sure that if you are an NADP member, you put the word member first and then your first and last name. If you are a guest, put the word guest first and your last name. At the end of the session, I stay on with guests so that I can meet them because most of our members I've already met. And then we do give the opportunity for our members to break out into a separate room and introduce themselves because it really is so important to be making national connections right now within the divorce space. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of need. If you are a member, you can see on our Facebook pages, you'll be able to see in our groups, a lot of times people are posting, I need an attorney here, or I need a realtor here in this state, or do you know anybody that you can connect me? So it's important that you're present on all those platforms as well and connect with others. Feel free to also in the chat box, write down your name, introduce yourself here, your name, what your profession is, and where you're located, because there may be a need for someone to reach out to you one-on-one. We don't, of course, want you guys spamming each other. That's not what this is about. But if there is a specific contact that you see that would be valuable for you to connect with, I would reach out. Make sure you include your email address. You can also, I'm sure everybody knows already by now that you can save the chat box, the transcription of it. It should automatically save if you click at the little 3 dots on the bottom where you would actually type a message in the chat box. It gives you the opportunity to save chat on top. If you do that, it will automatically save the transcription once you leave the meeting. Now, what else do I have? I think that's about it. If you have any questions to us, go ahead and put in the chat box. I think that I'm pretty much done with my introduction. And now I'm going to introduce to you our VP of Development, Nicole Fewer.
Hi, everyone. Really excited for this presentation today. Before I introduce our speaker, I will let you know that next month's monthly member meeting topic is on the collaborative divorce process, and they are going to be debunking the myths about collaborative. Really important for everybody to know that process and be able to support their clients if they're thinking about it. And we always do a marketing workshop every month. And next month for July is going to be about public speaking, the importance of it, how to find it, everything you need to know about public speaking. So always an important part of any business. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Dana Kahn-Gordon is a licensed clinical social worker, founder and CEO of FACES, which is Family and Co-Parenting Enrichment Services, and the not-for-profit entity FACES for Children, which is Facing Adverse Childhood Experiences for Children. Hopefully you all got the the handout that I emailed out, and you were able to fill it out, but Dana will touch on that. FACES provides many services to families going through divorce and or separation in the Tri-County area of South Florida and beyond. These services include co-parenting and parenting programs, supervised visitations, including therapeutic supervised visitations and monitored exchanges, individual, family, and play therapy, anger management courses, and forensic evaluations. FACES also conducts weekly free support groups for fathers, which is quite popular. Dana is trained as a Florida Supreme Court certified family mediator, guardian ad litem for the 17th Judicial Circuit Court of Florida, and as a parent coordinator. She obtained her master's degree in social work from Barry University in 1992 and has served the South Florida community over 30 years as a licensed clinical social worker and business owner. She is a member of the National Association of Social Workers and the National Association of Divorce Professionals, the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, and serves on the executive board for the Supervised Visitation Network. She is past president of Kidside, which is a non-for-profit organization that provides funding for family court services in Miami-Dade County. Dana oversees FACES daily administrative and clinical operations in the Tri-State County and has extensive experience assisting families going through divorce, separation, paternity, and post-dissolution issues involving children. She has tremendous experience, as you can hear. What a bio. And Dana, we will let you take it from here.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you for having me. I'm I feel very privileged and honored to be a presenter at a national organization such as the National Association of Divorce Professionals. And I get to talk about something that I'm very passionate about and something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that I have been studying because there's so much research out there and information on adverse childhood experiences that I'm just going to touch on the bare minimums of it today. So I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with adverse childhood experiences or not, but we are going to be talking about them today and delving into what they are. I'm hoping that I'm not going to have any more technical difficulties. We were on early for about 15 minutes trying to make sure my slide presentation worked. So should I bring that up now, ladies?
Yes. Yeah, you could bring that up now. Let's see.
Okay.
If it's
Fingers
working.
crossed. So
And
first,
before you start, can I just say something? I'm sorry. I wanted to say something before you came on because I wanted everybody to know how lucky they are to have Dana. I've known Dana for many years, and she is a wealth of knowledge, and her passion is so congruent with helping children with the mission of the NADP. So I just wanted to say that she's a great friend of mine, an incredible colleague, and I'm really looking forward to hear what you say. So I want to say that before.
thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm sharing my screen, right?
We don't see yet.
Obviously not technologically savvy, guys.
Go ahead and share the screen because we have hit share screen because we don't see it yet. There we go. Yep, perfect.
So are you seeing just the slide and not us talking and all that stuff?
Yep, it's working perfectly.
Woohoo!
Yay!
All right, so adverse childhood experiences, implications and strategies for building relationships through trauma-informed lens as divorce professionals as we are. So the objectives for today's presentation that I would like to be a take-home for you would be to understand what adverse childhood experiences are, and I'm going to be referring to them as ACEs. Why ACEs should matter to us as divorce professionals and the impact it has on us. And I want to find out, well, I don't want to find out because we're not going to share, but we're all going to find out, you're all going to find out what your ACE score is and what it means, how ACEs impacts your clients and us throughout our whole lives, what generational ACEs is, and mindful steps for us as divorce professionals to better serve our clients and ourselves, or actually I should say that in reverse, ourselves, because you have to serve ourselves and make sure we are healthy and functioning at a healthy level before we can serve our clients, right? And then lastly, strategies for trauma-informed or ACE-informed best practices for our businesses. I'm just going to close my door. Hold on one second. Didn't know if I was going to need assistance or not. So next slide. Gonna have to multitask here too. What are ACEs? ACEs stands for adverse childhood experiences. So back, I think it was in the 80s, there was a physician that had done some intakes and just regular exams. So it wasn't like a specifically focused research that they were doing on his obesity clinic with his obese clients. And he discovered that during their intakes, they were bringing up a lot of childhood traumas. So then in the 90s, the Center for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente, which is one of America's leading health insurance groups, they conducted a study to follow up on that. And out of 17,000 participants receiving physical exams, and they were asked about their childhood experiences, childhood trauma was a common theme. So there's been so many more studies, publications, research, and discussions that followed this over these years, and it's now a global conversation. It's a very important conversation, and it's a conversation that we need to have as divorce professionals. So if you're thinking that it's one of those studies like for underprivileged, unemployed, like so lower socioeconomic, inner city poor people, or folks with no insurance, or this isn't you and this isn't me, then you're wrong, because it's quite the contrary. These 17,000 participants were mostly white, middle, and upper middle class, college educated San Diegans. I mean, when you picture people living in San Diego, you picture like health and sunshine and people outdoors and really living their best lives. They had good jobs and they had great health care because they all belonged to this Kaiser Permanente insurance group. So the study uncovered how ACEs are strongly related to the development of disease in our adult life and throughout our life course. So what we experienced as children affect our health as adults. And that's kind of going to be the theme throughout these slides, is what we experience as children, even in utero, affect us in our adult lives and our health and even our life expectancy. So although there are many more ACEs, the ACE test that we're going to take today and the study that I'm talking about was just based on 10 of the most common experiences that the participants reported. So on another slide, there's a lot of other ACEs I'm going to talk about that are adverse, if you ask me. But right now, the test is just based on 10 most common childhood traumas that these people reported. So 5 are personal, meaning physical abuse to yourself, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect for you. The other 5 are related to other family members. So if you had a parent who was an alcoholic, a mother who was a victim of domestic violence, a family member in jail, a family member diagnosed with a mental illness, and if you experience divorce or separation of your parents, which is like what your whole group is about, right? Did it. All right. So why should ACEs matter to us as divorce professionals? Well, family law, right? ACEs are prevalent in family law, which is where the area we work with. So whenever a family interacts with the court system, that court system, be it family court, child protective services, juvenile delinquency, domestic violence court, paternity issues, we as divorce professionals are a part of that system because we are working with these families. We want to mitigate the harm already done and not do further harm, right? We don't want to do further harm if our families we are working with have already experienced trauma. So divorce and separation of families, domestic violence, substance abuse, mental health, these are all common issues in our everyday families we serve. One of the most significant ACEs that can impact a child's life is a high conflict divorce. So I use the term high conflict divorce because that's just what I'm used to seeing at faces. And that's just a common term I use. But if you notice in this study, they don't say high conflict. They just say divorce and or separation. So then we want to look at our own past trauma histories, right? So we're dealing with families that have trauma, but what about our trauma histories? So addressing your own unresolved primary trauma, you would be better able to advocate for your clients. So we need to be knowledgeable and aware and trauma informed, especially in today's day, like trauma informed, that's like a big thing. So trauma is to mental health as smoking is to cancer. If you have your own childhood trauma and you haven't dealt with it, this could and will eventually affect your work with these families. Maybe you'll be triggered or reactive or overreactive to something they say to you or a colleague says to you. Maybe you're overzealous about situations in your work, or you go into rescue mode. How many times do we all do that? ACEs can harm our long-term well-being. In our field of work, there are such high rates of depression, substance abuse, anxiety, stress, mental health issues, and even suicide, sadly. This can be a stressful field. Sometimes we go into these helping kinds of professions because of our own unhealed pasts. We are high-performing professionals, and there is recent national attention to adult mental health as a public health issue. So we crave stress management and wellness. So you're dealing with your families that have traumas, and then we are dealing with our own traumatic pasts. Divorce professionals are also exposed to secondary trauma, otherwise known as vicarious trauma. So listening to our clients and their traumas can be very draining and exhausting. So even though we're not witnessing or experiencing what our client's trauma is, we're still impacted by continually hearing about these traumatic experiences and seeing the impact that the trauma has on our clients. It can be upsetting even unconsciously for us. We might not even be conscious of this when we're listening to these stories that are very traumatic. I once heard an expression that meant a lot to me. It was very powerful. And it goes like, the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. So many of us suffer in silence too. So another reason why ACEs should matter to all of us is because of compassion fatigue. We are at risk for suffering from compassion fatigue. So some of the signs of compassion fatigue is there's an effect on us where we are exposed to shocking and traumatic events when working with these families, right, that have all these ACEs. So you'll be affected and you'll need to recognize the signs of when you're getting stressed or triggered, and you want to care for yourself first, and you want to recognize this. So like the airplane example, everybody knows that example where if you're on an airplane and you're crashing or you're in distress, you want to put that oxygen mask on yourself first before your child or your loved one, because you're not going to do any good for anybody if you're not able to be functioning in a healthy capacity yourself. So if you're not, ACEs can contribute to your toxic stress over the long term, which can wreak havoc on your ability to function in a healthy manner. So some signs of fatigue, compassion would include like exhaustion. I know I'm definitely guilty of that. Anger or irritability, decreased ability to feel empathy. That can happen. Maybe you'll have a diminished sense of career satisfaction, or your change in your worldview, like, oh, what's the point? My favorite is no one cares. That's when I go into my victim mode. You have heightened anxiety, hypervigilance, and difficulty separating work from your personal life. Or maybe you're dreading going to work because it's so overwhelming. So cognitive functioning, shortened attention span, this increased impulsivity and negativity impacts our ability to learn and make decisions. Those who grow up in these toxic environments and toxic stress, they don't have healthy coping skills, and they may struggle with emotional regulation and find it difficult to form stable relationships and communicate effectively. And working in this field, we need to have those skills to be effective with our clients. And of course, maladaptive coping behaviors. So what are our unhealthy coping behaviors that we might turn to? Maybe drinking too much, smoking, using illicit drugs, not recognizing our behavior when those around us, maybe at work or our families, are recognizing it. Walking around grumpy. Maybe we're working long hours, not exercising as often as we should be, or not sleeping restfully at night. I know I'm guilty of many of those things, and I do have to remind myself frequently to get back on track. And I know from talking to a lot of you, you feel the same. We're definitely overachievers and overworkers, and really have to pay attention to ourselves and treat ourselves nicely. Lawyers, if there's any lawyers in this group, how you react in court or with your colleagues is impactful, and our personal relationships can be affected, and so can our reputations. So we need to pay attention to this. All right, so we're all going to take the ACEs test together. So don't freak out. We're not going to share our scores, or we're not going to put them on the screen. You can just take your score in private. If you have a pen, every time you answer yes, you can give yourself a 1 or a little tally, or if you don't have a pen, you can count on your fingers. There's only 10 questions, and I'm going to read them. And when I read them, if you answer yes, just give your score, give yourself a score, give yourself a 1 or a tally, or if you don't have a pen, you can just, like I said, use your fingers. Okay, and then we're going to add them up at the end. So, number 1, prior to your 18th birthday, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, or put you down, humiliate you, or act in a way that made you feel afraid that you might be physically hurt? So it's yes or no. So remember, if it's a yes, you give yourself a point. Number 2, did a parent or other adult in the household, and remember it's before your 18th birthday, often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Ever hit you so hard that you had marks or you were injured? Number 3, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you, or have you touched their body in a sexual way? Did they attempt to have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Number 4, did you often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Did your family look out for each other? Yeah, did you have a close family? Did you feel close to each other and support each other? Did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat? You had to wear dirty clothes and you had no one to protect you? Or your parents were too drunk or too high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed it? All right, we're halfway through. I know these are intense questions. Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Ding, ding, ding. Right? And it doesn't even say high conflict like I mentioned before. So if your parents were ever separated or divorced, this is a trauma to you. And we didn't probably think of it that way. Was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Or often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? Ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with a knife or gun? Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic or who used street drugs? Was a household member of the family depressed or mentally ill? Or did anyone attempt suicide? And then lastly, did a household member ever go to prison? So you want to add up your scores, and when you add them up, that's going to be your ACE score. So don't freak out. If you have a high ACE score, I have a medium ACE score. It's just a mechanism that the scientists came up with to produce to access trauma and like give it a measurement. It's just a general indication of childhood trauma, and it's available online. It's a screening tool, so it's free. Anybody can take it or give it. It's not like you have to be a psychologist or a social worker. It's just available to kind of help guide us on this journey of comparing what happens to us as a child to what maybe we're at risk for as adults, for health risks, and maybe even the longevity of your life being shortened without treatment. So let's discuss what our scores mean. So naturally, if you scored 0 to 3, that's pretty much a low score. A medium score would be from a 4 to a 6, and a high score would be scoring over a 7. So the higher the number, the higher adversity a person was subjected to in their childhood. When they did the study, they produced these 10 questions, like I said, because they were the most common ACEs. The research that they've done on ACEs has explored and affirmed the relationship between traumatic childhood experiences directly impacts your adult illness and dysfunction. So to me, that's just mind-blowing, that connection. If you scored 4 or more, you are more susceptible to health issues as an adult. And if you scored 7 or more, that's when your life expectancy might be shortened. So if you have a high score and you're concerned, please speak to a professional about it. So we're not going to go into that today, but if you're concerned, I do advise you to go speak to someone about it or research it, because there's a lot out there. So if you look at this slide, the example they give under the little skull to kind of tell you how to score the ACEs test is, like I said, each trauma counts as 1. So the example they give is a person who's been physically abused with one alcoholic parent and a mother who was beaten up has this ACE score of 3, right? Throw in a divorce, and there you have a client we work with every day. So I don't know about you, but that's the clients I work with every day. So there's families with ACE scores of 4 or more walking in our doors every day for different services. So if you have all these ACEs, and you come to FACES to do a co-parenting course, that's going to affect your learning ability, your ability to learn the skills to have that relationship with your co-parent, how you're going to react in the divorce, could affect your finances, all kinds of things. So the other types of childhood traumas and ACEs that I said were there, but they just didn't use in the study, that they weren't the most popularly reported, are listed in the second list. And to me, like, those are pretty adverse as well. Racism, I mean, look at everything in the news these days. Bullying in our schools with the kids, major childhood adverse reaction to that. Watching a sibling being abused, that's traumatic. Losing a caregiver, if it's a grandmother or your mother at an early age. Homelessness, big adversity. Surviving or recovering from a severe accident if you were a child, or witnessing your father being abused by a mother. It's not as common, but it still would be an ACE. Foster care or involvement with the juvenile justice system. So to me, these are very important. They're just not listed as one of the ACEs right now, but I do believe going forward, they're going to change that, because this is all really affects you just as much, in my opinion. So another thing to consider is that this is just a guideline, like I explained, it's not the end all. And if you experienced other types of toxic stress over months or years, then that's going to affect you and your health. But there is a but. And on the positive side, if you have positive childhood experiences and you're a resilient person, that can also play a part in what happens to you when you get older and your health risks. So if your resiliency and good experiences, they can counteract the bad experiences. Good news is your scores can be counteracted by positive childhood experiences and how resilient you are. If you had a lot of adversity and a lot of positive childhood experiences, you're less likely to suffer the consequences of someone who didn't. So there's a whole topic and presentation I can do on resiliency. There's even a test you can take to see how resilient you are. But that would be for another presentation. Also, they say if you had a good role model in your life, that would be a positive childhood experience. That's important. So if we came over here and looked at the diagram, the impact, and I'm talking like without intervention, meaning if you didn't have that positive role model, or you didn't get therapy or have treatment, if you look at this diagram, it's from conception to death. So it's always evolving. It's not like it starts at a certain age. It starts from conception. The biology of a person can be different from the utero. So for example, if you take a pregnant woman, maybe she's poor, she has no money, she has no access to prenatal care or nutrition. Maybe she has some domestic violence thrown in there in her relationship. Well, guess what? Her baby is going to be exposed to these stressors. And the baby's makeup will be different from another baby in utero who wasn't exposed to these stressors. So the baby's already going to be born with a different makeup, making them more susceptible to illness later on in their lives. And maybe a disadvantaged neurological system as well. And then if you grow up in a home with mental illness from a parent, or substance abuse issues from someone in your family, or you witnessing domestic violence, your body is producing stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. And when your body constantly is producing these chemicals, it changes the trajectory of your neurological system and your brain. So these children, when they're growing up, that are constantly subjected to this, their brains are changing in a different way when they're growing up. There is a great TED Talk that if you guys are interested, you should watch. It's short, it's like 15 minutes, and it's given by Dr. Nadine Harris Burke. She was a pediatrician out in California, and she did work with children in the lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, but she did a lot of data and research with these children coming in, living with all these ACEs, with, diabetes and asthma, stomach aches, and physical ailments. And she's been appointed the Surgeon General, the first Surgeon General ever of California. She is now the Surgeon General, and she does this TED Talk where she describes these children that are growing up in these homes with so much trauma, with domestic violence or mental health issues, substance abuse issues, all those things I was explaining. And that she talks about when you're in your fight or flight mode and your body is releasing this adrenaline and cortisol, which she talks about is normal for certain situations. So if you were to see a bear, your body would go into that fight or flight mode, which you've all heard about, and your adrenaline would be pumping and your cortisol would be pumping, and it's getting your body ready to fight that bear, right? Or to run away from that bear. But she describes, and it's very impactful, that what happens when that bear comes home every single night. So these cortisol levels are elevated, and that's not going to be natural in your body, and it's going to change your brain. It's going to change your neurological chemistry. It's going to change how you react to stress when you're an adult. And they're going to be more susceptible to social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. When children are overloaded with stress hormones, they're in flight, fright, or freeze mode. They can't learn in school. They have difficulty trusting adults or developing healthy relationships with peers. To relieve their anxiety, depression, or guilt, or they have the inability to focus, guess what? Sometimes they turn to nicotine or drugs or alcohol, or they engage in high-risk sports or high-risk sexual behaviors. And then as adults, we overwork ourselves, we're overachievers, we don't feel satisfied. And this all leads to health issues in our adult life. Excuse me. An example of adults that are constantly in the court system that we might see as clients, they sometimes have difficulty managing their emotions. They have difficulties with their relationships and responding to trauma. It's because maybe their brains have been altered. So Bill Eddy, he talks, I don't know if all of you are familiar with Bill Eddy. He is a lawyer and he's also a social worker, and he has a clinic, high conflict divorce clinic in San Diego. And he's all over the world. He presents, I think he presented in one of the NADP conferences. And he's amazing. He's written a lot of books, so I highly recommend looking into his work. But he taught me, I like his talk about something we have in our brains that's called a corpus callosum. And the corpus callosum is located in our brains, and it permits both brains to communicate with each other. So we have a left brain and a right brain. And your right brain, I think, is the logical one, and the left brain is the emotional one. And your corpus callosum helps the brains communicate with each other. So if we get upset, right, we might act out, we might cry, we might get mad or whatever, but then the left side, our emotional side, communicates with our logical side, and we're able to problem solve. But one of the things that happens to these children growing up in these homes with many ACEs, where I'm explaining to you where their trajectory of their brains are developing in a different way, those corpus callosums are smaller. So they've done the research with these corpus callosums are smaller and underdeveloped. So sometimes if these people are emotionally reacting to something, they can't get to that logical side of their brain. that corpus callosum isn't helping the two brains connect. So they're always in that state of emotional distress. They can't manage their emotions. They can't calm down. Their amygdala is going crazy. They're fighting. They're in the courts. They're getting divorced. They're putting their children in the middle of it. They're, acting out. So it's important that if you understand that when you meet that kind of a person, that you would know that information, and there's different ways of talking to them and handling that. And then, of course, sickness, illness, and early death for 7 or more ACEs. So some key findings. So there's a high prevalence of ACEs and people who have ACEs. 2/3 of participants reported at least having one ACE, and more than 1 out of 5 reported 3 or more ACEs. So as I suggested, health consequences strongly linked to negative health and an increased risk of developing chronic diseases, depending on how many ACEs you've experienced. It's also a cumulative impact. So there's multiple ACEs, which increase the risk of developing these various health problems later in life. Just like I said, for us divorced professionals, that's cumulative also. Our own trauma, our clients' trauma, the trauma of just being in a high stress working environment. So this all affects our mental health, including depression. Some fascinating statistics is that at least 5 out of 10 of the leading causes of death are associated with ACEs. Us females are more at risk, minority populations, and the socially economically disadvantaged. 4 or more ACEs, you're 5 times more likely to be depressed. 2.93, you're more likely to smoke. 3.23, more likely to binge drink. So now that you know your ACE score, what does it mean? Well, we've been talking about how the ACE study, which was a long time ago, you'd think they'd come out with another study by now with another test, because this was in the 90s, is uncovered a link between childhood trauma and chronic diseases people develop as adults, as well as social and emotional problems. So heart and lung disease, cancer, how prevalent is cancer in our stressful society? Diabetes, autoimmune diseases, those are unexplainable. A lot of them, but maybe because of ACEs. Depression, violence, being a victim of violence, suicide, alcohol, these are all related to ACEs. Very important. And the researchers created the ACE score to explain a person's risk for chronic diseases later on in life. And I already explained to you that 1 point for each type of trauma is what gives you your ACE score. And ACEs are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation. So that's fascinating to me, that ACEs are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today. People usually experience more than one type of trauma. Rarely is it just only sex abuse or verbal abuse. For example, in a domestic violence situation, if you had domestic violence in your home, more likely than not, you're also going to have mental health issue and substance abuse to go along with that domestic violence. Then you're probably going to have verbal abuse, maybe incarceration because of the domestic violence if someone gets arrested, and then it goes from there, neglect, abuse, so it's kind of cumulative. The ACEs study opened the door to an understanding that ACEs are the root of nearly all problems of physical, mental, economic, and social health in humans, no matter where in the world those humans live. Not only is trauma widespread, but it affects people of all ethnicities and socioeconomic statuses. living through the experience of the pandemic, right? That's been traumatic for all of us, more traumatic to some than to all. I wonder what those studies will look like. Generational ACEs. ACEs can be passed down from generation to generation. This is called intergenerational trauma. The field of epigenetics shows that we're born with a set of genes that can be turned on and off, depending on what's happening in our environment. If a child grows up with an overload of toxic stress, their stress response genes are likely to be activated, so they are easily triggered by stressful situations that maybe don't affect those who don't grow up with toxic stress. They can pass that response on to their children. So, you know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in childhood doesn't stay in childhood. Interesting facts. Did you know children of Holocaust survivors are 3 times more likely to develop PTSD than the control group when they were exposed to traumatic events? The same is true for descendants of Native Americans who lost their land, their culture, their language, and their way of life. People who have been exposed to constant stressors can have changes happen in their genes at a cellular level. These make them more likely to have bad reactions to additional stressors and wears down their resilience. These altered genes become permanent and they are passed down through generations. So you may be responding to a traumatic events in your grandmother's life biologically. So when I was doing this presentation, I came across a study I had never heard of. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the potato famine for the Irish population. So they're currently doing research now about these epigenetic families and the famine that they went to, you know, years ago. But when the mothers were pregnant, their bodies were reacting and evolving, knowing that there wasn't going to be no food. And so when the babies were born, what happened? They retained calories. And now in their adult life, the Irish are dealing with issues of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and heart issues. They are struggling generations after the famine, and the research is attributing this to generational ACEs. I mean, isn't that fascinating? I would love to see and study more on the slavery on African Americans and the impact on these people. And if you think about it, think of all these different systems. We are all living organisms, constantly evolving and adapting to our environment. All right, back to divorce professionals. Liz, am I okay on time?
I would say another 5 minutes and then we can open up to Q&A.
Okay, I'll talk fast. So the impact of ACEs on divorce professionals is twofold. So take care of yourselves first, learn about your primary and secondary trauma, compassion, fatigue, and burnout, which we discussed earlier, and know that high-performing professionals such as ourselves are more prone to being affected by this stress. So primary trauma is your trauma, dealing with your own trauma, making sure you know what that is, knowing what to do with your ACE score. Secondary trauma, that's your client's trauma. The trauma of a stressful work environment, that could lead to burnout. And compassion fatigue, the traumatic events our clients are experiencing and fighting. So know the warning signs, monitor yourself, and take inventory of the balance between your work and your professional life, and understand it is normal to be affected by the work you do. ACEs can harm divorce professionals' long-term well-being, and until this knowledge is widespread, many of us will be plagued by our own traumas to the detriment of ourselves and our families and our clients and the whole legal system. So by understanding and managing your own trauma, you will be able to advocate better for your clients and yourselves. Or I should say that backwards, yourselves and then your clients. If you don't recognize your own stressors and treat them, be good to yourselves and take care of yourselves, your long, well-term being is going to be affected. So what are we doing to care for ourselves? Are you watching your nutrition? Are you exercising? Are you sleeping and eating well? Are you going on vacations? When was the last time you spent time with family and friends on a vacation? Lots of vacations. What about breathing? I don't think I breathed this whole time I've been doing this presentation, so I'm going to take a deep breath. Okay. Relaxing, pampering ourselves. Those of us with high caseloads and those with a high capacity for empathy are more at risk for experiencing compassion fatigue. So we already talked about our long-term well-being, understanding and managing our own trauma. Think about how much our clients will benefit when we take care of ourselves first, and we can recognize these issues and traumas and how to deal with them for our clients. When you are aware and come with knowledge, you are better able to meet your clients' needs on a deeper level. You are all part of the NADP group, so I know you're all here for that reason, and you want to better serve your clients, and it seems like you are already on that road. So helpful steps for all of you. So following simple steps designed to help you face your own trauma and or provide trauma and support to your clients. So we talked about assessing yourself, what your ACE score is, being aware of your own traumas and stress responses. So how you react to something might be different than how your husband or your wife reacts to something, right? And that's going to affect your relationship. Same with when you're getting divorced. How they respond to that, that's going to be different based on their stress responses from their childhood. Seek professional help if you need it. You need it, get the support. Support one another. You have a great group right here, so take advantage of your resources. Engage in extreme self-care. Be good to yourself. We talked about doing what you can do for yourself. And presume trauma. Always know that we all have our own traumas. We all have something going on. So instead of saying like, what's wrong with you? It's better to say like, what happened to you? I think Oprah is big on that. The ACE test is available. Like I said, it's free online. I don't know if you're interested in giving that to your clients. We give it to all of our clients here at FACES, and they love it because they like that connection. For some reason, it kind of, when you connect your mental health to your physical health, it kind of takes that stigma away. So everybody's interested in like, are you going to have a heart attack? Am I going to have cancer? Am I going to get a stroke? It's just amazing when you connect the two that people are more interested and are paying more attention. You can do a thorough intake with your clients. I think that would be very helpful. And collaborate with other professionals. So all of you being an NADP and collaborating and having one another is a really good resource. So this is the last slide. Strategies for trauma-informed practice as divorce professionals. So we've talked about understanding trauma as a pervasive issue. I hope you had a little bit of a better glimpse into that today. Deepen your understanding of trauma and the ACEs. Alleviating your client's stress and anxiety, because maybe you can notice from knowing a little bit more about their background, or maybe they took the ACE test with you, you'll understand what gets them stressed or what their stress responses are, and that helps build trust. Being open and transparent about the legal system with them. The legal system we understand, but it's very confusing and dysfunctional, and I think being open and transparent will help your clients relax and become less stressed. Check in with them often. I hear a lot of complaints that we as professionals, we don't get back to our clients, maybe because we're busy. Maybe it's because they write long, angry emails and we just want to avoid them. But whatever it is, like check in, let them know like, hey, we're going to be talking once a week, or no, we're only going to be talking once a month, or the next meeting will be, this. Verbally validate any feelings they express to you. So that's always a good communication tool to do anyway, is validate someone so they know you heard them. Being responsive to their needs, which you'll now know their needs a little bit more, knowing maybe that they have some ACEs that they grew up with. Tune into their body language so you can always tell if someone's like closed off, their arms crossed, or if they're looking down and not making eye contact, or maybe they're teary-eyed, or they're not listening, they don't have a good attention span. Because if you're trying to tell them something or teach them something or work through the process with them, they're not going to be able to pay attention if they have other things going on. Make adjustments to your environment. So making sure that when they come into your environment, that you have diversity on your walls. If you have pictures of people, nice soft colors, comfortable, inviting space for them to work with you. Taking breaks, because it's all very traumatic and stressful being in the divorce process. Depending on what you're going through, how high conflict it is, lawyers, judges, the law, it's just a lot. And then they have to take co-parenting or parenting if they're court ordered to do something. So it's just a lot for these families, especially if the kids, if they're being put in the middle. And then try not to take it personally if a client directs negativity at you, and be gentle and compassionate towards your client and yourself. So lastly, being aware of the existence and impact of faces should be foundational to any divorce professional's case plan. Don't take it out on your colleagues. Clients come and go, but the professionals you work with are still going to be there. And if you behaved poorly, they will remember that. Or if you acted out unprofessionally or unprofessionally in court, people are going to remember this, and your reputation's at risk. Establish a trauma-informed practice. Become a certified divorce professional. Your clients will not only gravitate towards you, but as representatives for them, you won't cause inadvertent stress and re-traumatization of your clients, and you'll be able to interact with your clients in accordance with their needs. If you can simultaneously consider the emotional background of your clients and stay closely attuned to their current frame of mind, your practice is a win-win for both you and your clients. And it's little to no cost. And in the long run, clients who feel comfortable with their legal team are more likely to make referrals in the future. So thank you so much for your attention today. I know that was a lot of information. I hope that wasn't too depressing.
Wasn't at all. Are you kidding? I mean, it wasn't happy-go-lucky, but it was definitely fantastic. That was, a tremendous amount of information that I think is so necessary, Dana. And I say this all the time. Those of you that know me know that I say this. Those of you that don't know me, who I'll get to meet after this presentation, very few of the divorce professionals are actually seeing the children. It's usually only the realtors and mental health professionals and possibly the lawyers. Even the lawyers don't see them. So they're not top of mind. They don't realize all of the stuff. And one thing that I found fascinating when I first learned about ACEs is how even ACEs came to be, and that it was pretty much a fluke. Like, it was a doctor doing a research at an obesity clinic. And when they started asking questions and interviewing and asking certain questions about weight, because a lot of them had dropped out of this weight loss program. And one of the questions they asked was, what was your weight, in different milestones, different points in their life? And one of them was, how much did you weigh when you lost your virginity? And they were getting answers like 40 pounds, 50 pounds, 60 pounds. And they're like, how is that so? And it was because they were all children. So they all had experienced some kind of, whether it was incest or some kind of sexual abuse. So they realized that out of almost 300 of these people they were asking questions, that 200 of them lost their virginity or had some kind of sexual abuse, and at a young age. So that's when they started realizing, hey, there's something to this, that people that experience this trauma or sexual abuse are prone to become obese. And that's when the study got more. So I just found that fascinating, and which also goes to show you all the things when divorce is an ACE on its own, whether it's a happy divorce, sad divorce, high conflict, low conflict, doesn't matter. Just the fact that this child has to go through all of this and moving homes and, throw in the high conflict and it gets a lot more detailed, and I'm sure it's more than one ACE when it's a high conflict scenario, right? Because then you have all the yelling and all the stuff involved as well. So important.
You know, Liz, it doesn't, and even though all of you don't see the children, you're still seeing the adults that were children at one time. So you can notice certain patterns from your clients who are already adults from what happened to them when they were children will tell a lot about how they're going to react to you and the services you're providing them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then it's a cycle, because then the service that you're providing them is now becoming an ACE for the children or not, right? They already have it with the divorce. So now how many more are they going to have because of this experience and this journey and all the other things that fall into play? So, really important to understand this. And thank you so much, Dana, for presenting this. And I definitely would love to have you come back about the resilience aspect, because that's sort of like secondary, right? Like, how do you become resilient? How can you help your clients become more resilient throughout this really challenging process? So I also wanted to give the code for our CDS grads for your continuing education. I will type it in the chat box right here. Hold on, it is DCG.
Does anyone have any questions?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's right. I forgot to say that. I know that I did put in the chat box, people were asking about, somebody asked about Bill Eddy and also the name of that YouTuber. So I put that link there.
I'll ask a question. Dana, are there any studies following people with ACEs having treatment and then assessing them in any other way to see if any of the risk factors have gone down?
Yeah, there's a ton of research out there. It was so hard to fit it all in 50 minutes. But yes, and it's very interesting. The whole thing is just so interesting because it's all interconnected.
Yeah. Love to
Great.
see what really makes that difference to help. What are the variables that will, make, like you said, the resiliency to ACEs, or, what happens, the effects of positive reinforcement or good relationships. I assume that those that do have good relationships, poor childhoods, lots of ACEs, but experience good relationships throughout their adulthood, probably have higher resiliency or less effect, which would be interesting to see. And I think you touched on it a little bit, like what's going to happen with, post pandemic and with children, and how many ACEs that's going to, to add as well, because I think that we're seeing we're experiencing a lot of the outcomes of that, like socially and suicide and all that. So, I mean, it's a topic for we can do a presentation every day. But Dana, you want to put your information, and also if anybody, FACES is amazing when it comes to supervised visitation, parenting courses. Dana is really active. She's also very well connected across the country. So if anybody ever has any situation with their clients or need help regarding any of those issues, reach out to Dana and FACES.
We also do a lot of virtual services, so we can help all of you. Exactly.
Awesome.
And Nicole, is there any, I'm trying to think of any announcements. I don't know if we have anybody from Canada on this call, but I am excited to announce that now the CDS training is available for Canadians as far as a Canadian manual. So now it is specific to Canadian law. So they actually get both US information. For those of you that don't know what the CDS is, the Certified Divorce Specialist Training, where it's in two parts. First part focuses on specific communication tools based on NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, that I teach in how to communicate more effectively with divorcing clients and manage a better experience, not just for the client, but for the professional too, because that's a huge issue that we usually don't address. And I think you talked a little bit about compassion fatigue. As someone that goes through ACEs, but also divorce professionals experience it a lot, being that you are dealing with clients with a lot of ACEs, or one for sure that they're going through. So We do that, and then the second part of the training is just a basic, holistic understanding of all of the legal, financial, mental health, and real estate implications on the divorce process. Who are the professionals in play? Who you need to have on your team, and those, like I said, now are also specific to Canada. So excited about that, and I think that that's about it right now as far as announcements go. Right, we're gonna leave the members in this room with Nicole, where you're going to introduce yourself and meet each other if you haven't already. I believe we have 2 guests today that are not members that you can come with me if you want to introduce yourself so I can get to know you. There'll be a breakout room for us. And I think that that's about, oh, you know what? It's June. We always have a theme for our introductions that you can ask. That you can add to your introduction. So because we just passed Father's Day, why don't you add one thing that you've learned in your life from a father figure? It doesn't have to be a father, but a father figure in your life when you're making your introduction. And I will see the guests in the other room.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Dana. And you're welcome to stay and meet everybody if you like, or I know you're very busy. So,
Yeah, I have to get going, but call me later.
okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dana.
Bye.
And Nicole, you may want to stop the recording. Oh, I can do it here.